I thought I told you to get on down the hill.
Thought you might need this. Think you got a corner on all this real estate?
He was the most decorated American soldier of World War II, a hero who stared down death and then became a Hollywood legend. The world knows how Audie Murphy lived, but they don't know the truth about how he died. For decades, the official story was a tragic accident, a hero's life cut short by bad weather. But a very different story has exploded online, whispered in forums and presented as fact in viral videos. It's a story not of an accident, but of a carefully constructed lie meant to bury a dark secret. This story hinges on a powerful claim that Audie Murphy's son, now in his 70s, has finally broken his silence to confess a harrowing truth about his father. But what is that truth? And did this confession ever actually happen? Tonight, we're digging into one of America's most enduring mysteries. We will separate the man from the myth, the official story from the sinister theories, and the documented facts from the fabrications that promise a darker reality. Because the story of Audie Murphy's death is far more complex, and in many ways, far more tragic than a simple plane crash. It's a story about what happens when a nation's greatest hero becomes a man haunted by demons, debts, and powerful enemies, leaving behind a legacy so powerful that people refuse to let his story end with a simple accident. Before we get into the shadows, we have to appreciate the light. Audie Leon Murphy's life story feels like something a Hollywood screenwriter would dream up, but it all began in the stark poverty of the Texas cotton fields. Born in 1925 to a family of poor sharecroppers, he was one of 12 children. His father was a ghost, drifting in and out of their lives before abandoning them completely. From a young age, Audie became the man of the house, using a rifle to hunt small game just to feed his mother and younger siblings. Life was a daily struggle. When his mother died in 1941, 16-year-old Audie was devastated. Several of his younger siblings were placed in an orphanage, and he made a promise to himself. One day, he would earn enough to reunite his family. That same year, the world went to war. For Audie, it wasn't just a patriotic duty. It was a chance to escape hardship and make good on his promise. But the military didn't see a hero. They saw a kid. He was too young, too small, and too skinny. The Marines, the Navy, and even the Army initially turned him away. But Audie didn't quit. With the help of his older sister, who signed an affidavit fudging his age, the undersized 17-year-old finally got into the U.S. Army. That one decision would change American military history forever. Shipped to the battlefields of Europe, the boy from Texas became a warrior of unbelievable ferocity. In North Africa, Italy, France, and Germany, Murphy's bravery became legendary. He didn't just fight, he led from the very front, constantly putting himself in harm's way to protect his men. But it was on January 26, 1945, near Holtzwihr, France, that Audie Murphy became immortal. His company was being hammered by German tanks and waves of infantry. Vastly outnumbered, Murphy ordered his men to fall back, but he stayed. He climbed onto a burning M10 tank destroyer, loaded with fuel and ammunition, a ticking time bomb, and for over an hour, wounded and totally exposed, he used its .50 caliber machine gun to single-handedly fight off the German advance. He killed an estimated 50 enemy soldiers, and only stopped when he ran out of ammunition. Then he limped back to his men, refused medical care, and led a successful counterattack. For this, he was awarded the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest award for valor. By the end of the war, he had received every combat award for valor the U.S. Army could give, plus medals from France and Belgium. He was America's most decorated soldier, and he was just 21 years old. When he returned home, he wasn't just a boy from Texas anymore. He was a national hero. His face was on the cover of Life magazine. Hollywood came calling, and legendary actor James Cagney convinced him to try acting. Murphy went on to star in 44 movies, mostly westerns, where he often played the hero. He He even played himself in the 1955 film based on his autobiography, To Hell and Back. And he kept his promise, using his earnings to buy a home for his siblings, finally bringing his family back together. On the surface, Audie Murphy was the American dream made real. A poor farm boy turned war hero and movie star. He had a wife, Pamela Archer, and 2 sons, Terry and James. He was one of the most recognizable faces in the country. But the medals and the movie roles were a mask, hiding a private war that was raging inside him, a war that would follow him for the rest of his life. The end of Audie Murphy's life came on May 28, 1971. He was a passenger on a private, twin-engine Aero Commander 680E, flying on business from Atlanta, Georgia to Martinsville, Virginia. He was reportedly chasing a deal he hoped would finally pull him out of his deep financial troubles. The weather that day was awful. The skies over Virginia were choked with rain, fog, and low clouds, completely hiding the mountain ridges. The pilot, Herman Butler, had a private pilot certificate, but was not instrument rated. That's a crucial detail. It means he was legally required to fly by sight, not by his instruments, but he was flying into conditions where there was nothing to see. According to the official investigation by the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, the pilot never even filed a flight plan. Just before noon, he radioed the FAA's Roanoke station, which warned him that the mountain ridges were completely obscured. The pilot said he planned to land in Roanoke. That was the last anyone heard from them. Witnesses later reported seeing the plane circling aimlessly near Galax, Virginia. It was clear the pilot was lost and in over his head. Around 12:08 p.m., the plane slammed into the side of Brush Mountain. The impact was catastrophic, and the aircraft was destroyed by the collision and fire. Because there was no flight plan, the search was delayed. It took 3 days for rescue crews to finally locate the wreckage. They found a devastating scene. All 6 people on board, including Audie Murphy, were dead. The news hit the nation like a punch to the gut. Audie Murphy, the hero who had survived the worst of World War II, the man who seemed invincible, was gone at just 45 years old. He was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. You'll often hear that his grave is the second most visited, right after JFK's. While there's no official list to confirm that, the sheer number of visitors shows just how much he meant to the country. In 1972, the NTSB released its final report. The conclusion was blunt. There was no evidence of any failure in the plane's structure, systems, or engines before impact. The probable cause was the pilot's decision to fly by sight into terrible weather at an altitude too low to clear the mountains. He was flying in instrument conditions that were simply beyond his operational capabilities. In the cold, hard language of aviation, it was pilot error, a simple, tragic accident. For decades, that was the official story. A hero's life, cut short by bad weather and a pilot's fatal mistake, but for a man whose whole life was about surviving. Against impossible odds, such a preventable death just felt wrong. And for those who knew about the chaos in Audie Murphy's life, the pieces never quite fit. But while America saw a legend, the man himself was fighting a war inside his own head. Today, we call it post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. Back then, it was brushed off as battle fatigue, a condition nobody really understood or talked about. For Audie, it was daily torture. He suffered from crippling insomnia, depression, and nightmares that threw him right back onto the battlefield. He was restless, easily startled, and always on edge. He slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow, a reflex from a war that never left him. He became so dependent on sleeping pills that at one point, he locked himself in a motel room for a week to force himself through a brutal, lonely withdrawal. He was one of the very first public figures to speak openly about this, demanding the government do more for veterans returning with these invisible wounds. His advocacy was brave, but it also made him a problem for a government that preferred its heroes to be smiling and silent. On top of his personal demons, He was in serious financial trouble. Despite his Hollywood success, Murphy was a reckless gambler. He threw away fortunes on high-stakes poker and bad horse racing bets. By the late 1960s, the man who had earned millions was bankrupt. He owed a lot of money to very serious people, the kind of people who don't care if you're a war hero. That business trip to Virginia was reportedly a last-ditch effort to land a deal that could fix his money problems. Friends said that in the weeks before he died, Murphy seemed paranoid and scared, admitting he was worried for his own safety. And it's this dark backdrop, a haunted hero, drowning in debt, and a vocal critic of the government, that fuels the suspicion. Was it really just a tragic accident? Or was it something else? The questions started bubbling up right away. Why fly in such terrible weather? Who was he really meeting in Virginia? The official story just felt too neat. It didn't account for the desperation that had defined Audie Murphy's final years. This is where the story splits. On one side, you have the NTSB report, a document of cold, hard facts pointing to pilot error. On the other, you have a pile of troubling circumstances and whispered rumors. This is where Audie Murphy's death stops being a tragedy and starts being a conspiracy theory. A new story began to form. The plane crash wasn't an accident. It was an execution. Once you start looking for holes in the official story, the theories come pouring in. For conspiracy theorists, the NTSB report wasn't an ending. It was the start of a cover-up. 3 main theories emerged, each painting a picture of a man who was deliberately silenced. The first theory is the most straightforward. The mob did it. Murphy was in deep with loan sharks connected to organized crime. The story here is simple. He couldn't pay, so they made an example of him. A plane crash is the perfect cover. A public tragedy that avoids the scrutiny of a mob-style hit. People who believe this point to the threats Murphy supposedly received and the secretive nature of his trip. The second theory is even more sinister. The U.S. government was involved. Murphy wasn't just a veteran with PTSD. He was a loud and influential critic of the government's neglect of soldiers coming home from Korea and Vietnam. By shining a light on the government's failures, was he tarnishing the image of military service? Some argue that silencing him became a priority. A darker branch of this theory suggests Murphy knew too much, that through his connections, he'd stumbled onto information about government corruption or covert operations and was about to blow the whistle. The third and most explosive theory is the one that has really taken off online. It claims that Murphy was targeted by a conspiracy involving both organized crime and corrupt government agents. It suggests that Murphy, desperate for cash, had gotten tangled in some illicit deals and was about to expose everyone involved. This is where the so-called evidence comes in. Online videos and forums claim that independent investigators have re-examined the case and found proof of sabotage, cut control wires, traces of explosives, things the NTSB supposedly missed or ignored. They talk about anonymous whistleblowers from the Air Force and secret documents stamped national security that are keeping the public from the truth. It's a gripping story. A hero, about to expose a massive conspiracy, is taken out in a staged accident, and the truth is buried by the very institutions he fought to protect. These theories offer a more dramatic, and for some, a more fitting end, for a man whose life was anything but ordinary. They turn Audie Murphy from a victim of a tragic accident into the final casualty of a war he never truly left. But there's a big question we have to ask. Is any of it true? And what about the most powerful piece of the puzzle, the supposed confession from his own son? This brings us to the heart of the matter and the title of this story. At 73, Audie Murphy's son finally confesses the truth on his father. It's an incredibly powerful idea. After 50 years, a son, tormented by a secret, finally comes forward to say his father was murdered. It's the ultimate confirmation. If his own son says it was murder, it must be true, right? The story goes that one of Audie's sons, Terry or James, broke the family's silence. claiming they always knew it was sabotage, but were threatened into staying quiet. This narrative is the emotional core of the modern mystery. But here is the actual truth. After scouring public records, news archives, and official sources, there is absolutely no credible, verifiable evidence that either of Audie Murphy's sons ever made such a confession. It's a fabrication. Audie's older son, Terry Murphy, who was involved with the Audie Murphy Research Foundation before his passing, gave interviews where he spoke with love and honesty about his father. He talked about his pride in his father's heroism, but also spoke candidly about his deep and lasting PTSD. He never publicly claimed his father was murdered. Audie's younger son, James Skipper Murphy, lived a much more private life and passed away in 2023. There is no record of him ever making a public statement that his father was the victim of a conspiracy. The idea of a 73-year-old son's confession is a complete myth, an internet-born fiction designed to give weight to the conspiracy theories. So what about the other evidence? The independent investigators with their modern forensics? There are no published reports from any accredited lab to back this up. The anonymous whistleblowers, they exist only on conspiracy websites. The sealed national security documents? The NTSB report is public. You can go read it yourself. The reality is that the official story, while unsatisfying, is the only one backed by facts. The pilot, Herman Butler, was not instrument-rated and was inexperienced in that specific type of aircraft. The decision to fly into a storm, in mountains, with a pilot not certified for those conditions, is a tragically simple explanation for the crash. The story of Audie Murphy's death isn't about a hidden truth, but a preferred one. It's hard to accept that a hero who seemed superhuman could die from something as mundane as pilot error. A conspiracy, a mob hit, a government plot, offers a grander ending for a man of his stature. The confession of his son is the fictional climax to this preferred story. It provides the emotional validation that people crave. But in doing so, it dishonors the very real and documented struggles Audie Murphy actually faced. The tragedy isn't that he was murdered. It's that the hero who saved so many couldn't save himself from the burdens he carried home. The line between history and myth can get pretty blurry, and with Audie Murphy, it has all but disappeared. The theories are compelling, but they just aren't supported by evidence. So what do you believe? Was it a tragic accident, as the official report concludes? Or do the unanswered questions point to something more? Let us know what you think in the comments below. We read them all. And if you want to explore more of history's greatest mysteries, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. In the end, the Audie Murphy story is a profound American tragedy, just not for the reasons the conspiracies suggest. The real tragedy isn't that he was the victim of an assassination plot, but that he was a victim of his own legend. As a nation, we needed him to be an indestructible hero. We celebrated the 21-year-old soldier on the burning tank, but we weren't prepared to deal with the broken man who came home. We profited from his fame, while largely ignoring his cries for help and his advocacy for veterans suffering from the same invisible wounds he did. We turned him into a myth, and, in doing so, we abandoned the man. The allure of a conspiracy is that it gives us a clear villain. But the truth of Audie Murphy's decline is far more uncomfortable. His enemies were his own trauma, his addictions, and a society that wanted a simple hero, not a complex and suffering human being. The plane crash on Brush Mountain was just the final tragic outcome of a life spent in a downward spiral, burdened by the weight of being America's greatest hero. The mystery isn't about who might have killed Audie Murphy. The real and more painful question is what we, as a nation, could have done to save him. His legacy isn't just one of heroism, but a haunting reminder of the true price of war and the cost of fame. And that is a truth far more profound than any conspiracy.